I am very excited to introduce to you today Professor Wagner Quiros from the UC Santa Barbara's Environmental Studies program. Professor Quiros holds a master's degree in environmental science and management from UCSB's very own Bren School. He is originally from Costa Rica and has over 15 years of experience working with sea turtle research, conservation, and fisheries management at a small scale fishing communities in Costa Rica, and a long career of leading hundreds of university student groups from North America, Australia, and Europe through Costa Rica. He is a Latin American Fisheries Fellow and has the postgraduate career goal to contribute to community managed fisheries in Latin America to achieve sustainable management of their marine resources. Today's lecture will explore the fascinating world of sea turtles, as well as their current conservation status and ecological roles within coastal and marine ecosystems. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Professor Quiros.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Thank you, everybody, for joining this lecture. It is indeed a passion for me to talk about sea turtles. I've been teaching this topic for the environmental studies program at UCSB since 2020, and also been having students from the ecology, evolution, and marine biology program as well. Today, I just gave a talk to one of those group of students. It was about 200 students on one of the ecology and evolution class earlier this morning. So I thought quite some about what topics I would like to share with you. And I figured it will be really interesting for you to get something out of this talk so that you can actually use, right? Some of you might become gauchos. Some of you might come here to UCSB and study. Some of you are not going to be students, but you're joining this lecture to learn about sea turtles, or maybe you're parents from students. You will most likely going to be traveling. You're most likely going to be seeing turtles different places, either through TV or pictures of images or social networks or documentaries. And so the objective of this talk is going to be to teach you about the different species of sea turtles, talk a little bit about their conservation, but how to identify those species as well. And then I will share some diagnostic characteristics of those organisms. For instance, this is a sea turtle. This is a marine turtle, but what species is this one that you are actually seeing right now on the screen? Can you tell? How would you tell? What is the diagnostic characteristics of this species? And so I'm going to go over that information with you in this lecture. And then after, we're going to do an interactive exercise. So I'm going to be asking you about, I'm going to show you an image. And after I try to teach you about how to identify these organisms, I will let you on the chat tell me what species you think you are seeing. A little bit of background. I started working with sea turtles many years ago. And one of the most fascinating thing about sea turtles is that working with sea turtles not only involve working with these ancient organisms, but it also involves working in a multidisciplinary approach. So that involves working in coastal communities, sometimes looking into economic alternatives for these communities, in which communities do extractive and unextractive uses of these organisms. So there is, the economic component, for instance. Then you have a social component, a social ecological component, in which these communities and these people have generations linked with these organisms in their backyard, so they're used to seeing these animals. In general, the environmental studies topics allows for that expansion of focuses. So, for instance, their migratory behavior. So you jump into, for instance, oceanography topics or the reproductive biology, their ecology, the roles that these organisms have in the ecosystems, as different species have different roles. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, depending on their feeding behavior and the habitats that they live in. And so I started my sea turtle journey quite some years ago. This is when I used to have hair, when I used to have long hair, back in my when I was 19 years old. The date on those cameras don't lie. It's actually it's about to be 25 years. It's April 4th of the year, April 10th of 2000. Sea turtles nest in seasons, and so what you see in different places of the planet is that, for instance, um, Caribbean leatherbacks, they nest between the months of March until July, with a peak of nesting in April and May in the Central American Caribbean and some Caribbean islands. In the Eastern Pacific, so in the Pacific side, the nesting season for these individuals go from November until February. So although they are the same species, depending on the oceans that they live in, they migrate and they feed on, they have different reproductive seasons. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. This is the biggest of all sea turtle species. We're talking of an animal of about these animals can reach close to half a ton in weight. Without the head, the size of the head, the carapace length of this one is probably about 7 feet, so it's quite big. And then their nest is, if you see the track of this individual on the beach, it's like a four-wheel drive. It's quite impressive. When I'm not on the field during the summer, when I'm not teaching at UCSB, sorry, I'm in the field during summers. And so this is on the right side, another species of sea turtle. This is a green sea turtle. And then I'll teach you how to identify that animal very soon. And then on the left side, you see me with a group of students from a couple of years ago, because I'm very passionate also about um, teaching, hands-on teaching on the field, practical skills, skills that would allow students to apply in the field what they learn in the class. And so I'm always during the summer going back and forth nesting grounds in Costa Rica with students and staff who's doing research and training students as well. So I combine both worlds, the academic world of teaching and theory, and I do my class try to do my class to be really hands-on as well. But then in the field is where the nesting takes place, where the turtles are, when you get all the practical experience. Okay, so we have in total 7 species of sea turtles. We mainly have 2 families of sea turtles. So we have the chelonid family. These ones right here from the flagback, the hawksbill, loggerhead, Camp Ridley, olive ridley, and the green sea turtle. This is the Chelonidae family. And then we have one sea turtle species only from the Dermochelidae family, which is the leatherback sea turtle, the biggest of all sea turtle species that I just showed you. The Chelonidae family is mainly organisms that have a hard shell, hard bone carapace, while the leatherback sea turtles they have that's what they're called, leatherback. Actually, they don't have a hard bone carapace compared to the other organisms. They have more of a distinctive leathery, scalish carapace. Okay. In here, we can actually see a little bit of their distributions, because I think this is important. So we have the leatherback sea turtle on the left side, which has a more pelagic strategy, more open ocean strategy. So these are extremely migratory species. I'm going to show you a figure which shows satellite movements of leatherback sea turtles, and it's quite impressive the distances that they actually cross. One big ocean, the Pacific Ocean, for them is not a barrier to go from point A to point B. One of the most fascinating topics about this species is that they mainly feed on jellyfish or salps, and they can reach out to that weight that I just mentioned, about half a ton, 7, 8 feet length. They're massive. And then we have the other Chelonidae species, in which we have the flatback, which is mainly found in Australia, and then in northern Australia, south of Papua New Guinea, and around the northern region. So that species is specifically from there. The green sea turtle is the most widely distributed sea turtle of all sea turtle species. And then you have the hawksbill sea turtle, which mainly feeds on sponges. Green sea turtle mainly feeds on plants. So it's really interesting to see how different species of the current sea turtles that we have in our planet actually have different feeding behaviors, which drives them to different environments. They're called capsule species, and so they are important species that affect the environments in which they live at and they feed on, with the abundance and distribution of their prey, for instance. So flatback greens and hawksbill, you find it mainly on coral reef and algal beds, and that's mainly related to their feeding behavior. And then you have the loggerhead and the olive ridleys, or the olive ridley and the chem ridley, the ridleys, which are mainly on a more continental shelf location, more of an neritic strategy, which means like they are in shallower waters. We're talking about maybe 700 feet depth. They're usually closer to the coast, and that's kind of like the area in which they move around. They feed 95% or more, over 95% of the time of a sea turtle's life they spend in the water. They spend it in the ocean. Females only come to the beach to nest. They lay their eggs. They leave those eggs on the beach, and they go back to the ocean. One really interesting reproductive behavior that they have is that depending on the different species, sea turtles can actually come in. They lay a batch of eggs. Some of them might lay even 100 eggs at a time. They release those eggs, they cover the nest, they leave to the ocean, and then they start producing more eggs, and then they fertilize those eggs internally, and then come back to the beach and lay another batch of eggs again, so a whole new nest. Some of them can actually do it up to 10 times. For instance, a leatherback sea turtle, every 10 days, that same animal will lay one nest, go back to the water, lay another nest, go back to the water. Greens will do it 3-4 times, for instance. Other species would do it 3 times. And during one nesting season, they will lay all this number of nests. And then they will, after that huge investment of energy, they will go back to the feeding grounds. And so they will migrate, and sometimes their internesting periods will change from 2 to 3 years, even 4 years. So that means that one specific individual most likely won't come next year to nest. If we're talking about, for instance, greens or hawksbills or leadback or loggerheads, they will migrate, go to the feeding grounds. Sometimes it's really, really far away. I will show you some maps. They will recharge again. They will get energy, nutrients, and then they will migrate back to the reproductive grounds, which is usually tropical and subtropical areas. So let's talk about these 7 swimmers. So 7 current species of sea turtles. We have the leatherback. We have the loggerhead. This is the scientific name, the genus and the species. The leatherback is Dermochelis coriacea. Mainly, this name comes from the carapace that is sort of leathery without a hard bone shell like all the other rest of the species. We got the loggerhead, careta careta, which is caret comes from, it's a Latinized word of the name caret, which means turtle, sea turtle in French. The green sea turtle, Chelonia midas. Green comes from a really interesting characteristic on green sea turtles, which is what they have is they have a greenish tinge in their fat because of their feeding behavior mainly on seagrass. Then we have hawksbills. Because of the shape of the head, the turtles have a narrow head, a very pointy beak, and then their carapace the plates on the carapace overlaps. You're gonna see that in pictures, which is easier. We have the flatback, Natator depressus, mainly in the Australian area, and then the olive ridley and the chem ridley, the 2 cousins, the Lepidoscelis cousins, Lepidoscelis olivacea and Lepidoscelis kempi. This is the only 2 species that actually nest in mass nesting numbers. That means that thousands of turtles gather and synchronize at the same time to come out on the beach and nest. So you have 3 main nesting strategies. You have individual solitary nesting strategies. So one turtle will go, lay its eggs, go back and do that back and forth. You have colonial nesting, in which a lot of sea turtles the same species will come into a specific area, like an island, for instance, and they will nest, and they simply just is the area where they all will go to nest, and doesn't mean that they're synchronized. It simply is the area where these turtles will go back to lay their eggs. But because the numbers are really high, it's called colonial nesting. And then you have the mass nesting events, which is a synchronization of nesting, which 1,000 to half a million turtles in a time frame of 2 to about 4 or 5 days will synchronize and nest in some places happening once a month, and it's quite fascinating. This is a little image of so you can actually see the different incisors of the turtles that I just showed you. Remember that we have 7 species: the leatherback, the loggerhead, the green, the flatback, the hawksbill, the Kemp Ridley, and the olive Ridley sea turtle. You can actually see here I'm about 5'8", 5'9", probably, hopefully 5'10". And you can actually see 5'8" in relation to a leatherback sea turtle right here. So you can see the massive difference of size, and then loggerhead and greens until we actually reach the smallest of sea turtle species, which is still, the smallest is 2.5 foot shell and about 100 pounds. So it's small, but it might be quite big. And the one that you actually have in the background, there's only the shade of it. It's called Archelon, and it was found in the late 1800s here in the United States. Actually, it was found in the pure shell of South Dakota. This is really interesting because the carapace it's assembled in the opposite direction. So you have the plastron and the carapace in the opposite direction. But this is one of the soft shell turtles. Is part of that family of sea turtles. This is where the animal was actually found here in South Dakota. When we will show that North American Lake Cretaceous big sea that you had there in the middle of the country, and the Mississippi embayment as well. This is a really fascinating picture of a Archelon quiros. Again, this is an extinct sea turtle species, but this just gives you a little bit of an idea about how massive there was a time in which these organisms were extremely really big. Their distribution is pretty worldwide. You get organisms feeding up into in front of the coast of Canada, Nova Scotia. They feed in that area, for instance, leatherback in the Atlantic, and they will come down and migrate down to Central America to nest and lay their eggs. Even their feeding distribution of some of them will extend to the waters of New Zealand, close to Argentina as well, and subpolar regions. So they pretty much, you'll find sea turtles pretty much all over the place, and you find a connection with sea turtles and people and in the human society for since many years. We're talking that the first material evidence of extraction of sea turtles was in South Africa in the Sibuto cave. It was a publication from the journal Science that went back to the middle of Stone Age. So we're talking about 66,000 years ago. So we're talking about thousands of years in which humans have had this close relationship with an interaction with sea turtles, and we still have it. It's still present. This is just a map of distribution of sea turtles, of different sea turtle species and organisms through the oceans. You have the Atlantic Ocean right here. You got the American continent, Africa, and then you have Japan right here on the right. And this is a route that some organisms will follow. And actually, some of them will actually cross the whole Pacific Ocean. Just look at this fascinating figure right here. So this is a map of leatherback sea turtles. And if you look in here, there is some. So the way that this works is they to research the movement of sea turtles, you place a cell light transmitter on top of the carapace, and then every time the transmitter has an antenna, and every time the turtle comes out and breathe, because they have lungs, they need to come out and breathe. That the two screws on the cell light transmitter will connect, and then it will triangulate with cell lights, and it will pinpoint the location of the turtle. So that's the way that these maps are created. And so you can actually see here, which is fascinating, some turtles, leatherback turtles that nest in areas of close to Indonesia, and then you have here some nesting grounds close to Malaysia. These turtles will come here, cross 10, 12,000 miles across the Pacific Ocean to really important feeding grounds in front of the coast of Canada, of the United States, California, and Oregon. mainly. We have some movements up here in the north. For instance, in the Monterey Bay, in that area, there has been important sightings of leatherbacks feeding actively on jellyfish. And once they recover all the energy they invested in the reproductive cycle, they will go back and forth and then just strategically nest, gather energy, and migrate. And those are huge migrations for an organisms. The ones that nest in Central American area, they will go down to the waters in front of Ecuador or Peru and Chile. You have the Humboldt Current there bringing a lot of nutrients. They will feed in there, and then after they will go back into their the reproductive ground. Same thing that happens in the Atlantic, as I mentioned before. So I have a question for you. So I want you to think for a couple of minutes. If you have a piece of paper, it will be great if you can just think about, is it better if we think about that map that I show you, is it better to be a big turtle, a massive 7 or 8 foot sea turtle, or is it better to be a smaller turtle, let's say 3 feet turtle, so half of that size, way less than half of that weight and volume? And what will be more beneficial if you go to areas which are subpolar regions, in which it's very, very cold? So I want to give you, I want to clock myself, and I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to just think about that. Think about what would be more beneficial, to be a big turtle or to be a small turtle if you actually migrate to areas which are very cold, where the water is very cold. So think about it, and then if you can make a note on the, let me see, on the chat. Oops, sorry. On the chat here, that would be great. So you could just write down, what do you think was more beneficial, big turtle or small turtle? Think about those numbers as well, and think about size. And then let's see what you say, and then I will explain. Couple minutes. It's on you. Okay, why big? Some people are saying. Okay, some answers are coming. Good. All right. Keep going, keep going. Keep sharing your thoughts. This is great. Every response is valid. Every response is important. All right. Excellent. All right. Thank you, everybody, because you're quite active, so that's great. 1 minute and 20 seconds. Keep your thoughts coming. All right. Awesome. Thank you, Brooke, Cami, Mia, Brisa, Melissa, Samantha, Cameron, Brooke, Kelly, Stella, Lisa, John, Logan, Kimberly, Brooke, Olivia, Jack, Juna, Peyton, Evelyn, Emiri, Lexi, Megan. All right, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. And so if we look at these numbers, okay, and you were right. Most of you got the response. So the relationship that you will look into is the relationship between surface area and volume, right? And so what is the ratio between that surface area and volume? So there is great advantage, as a lot of you mentioned, of being a big sea turtle. That's what leatherbacks do migrate. And I sort of gave you a hint before, right? They migrate to very cold environments because the relationship with surface and volume, the ratio is 1/3. So that means that there is way more volume in the turtle compared to the surface area. So the exposure of the internal organs and the organism itself and its volume is sort of protected within the size of the turtle, right? Compared to a ratio between surface area and volume with a small turtle, right? So the exposure of that turtle to the cold environment will be bigger. So in this case, for northern and southern migratory species of sea turtles, leatherbacks have the biggest adaptation because of their big size. There is actually some projects from the Chelonides species that actually migrate north of the United States, and sometimes they get cold stone turtles. So when the water is really cold, they find them on the beach, and they actually, if you look at it, they actually warm them up and they bring into labs and then sort of recover them after they're cold stone, and they release them back. So, okay, good job, everybody. Well done. So some of the things that I want to cover right now, it's specific characteristics of sea turtles so that you can actually identify the different species of sea turtles. So one really important component is the prefrontal scales. So that means the scales that are in front of the eyes. So here in this image, you will see 1, 2, 3, 4 scales in front of the eyes. And then the postocular scales, which means the scales that you find behind the eyes. So you have 1, 2, 3 postocular scales. So the prefrontal scales and postocular scales are really important to help you identify the different sea turtle species. At the same time, the lateral scutes that you actually see here in this red circle is 1, 2, 3, and 4 scutes is representative of different sea turtle species. You might have more scutes on the lateral scutes, more scutes number. You can go up to 5, you can go up to 6 or 7. I will show you in a second. But these lateral scutes count together with the prefrontal and postocular scales are really important. In here, you have a key to identify the different species of sea turtles. So in here, you have of the leatherback, so no scutes, very long 7 ridges. They have 7 white ridges along the carapace, massive sea turtle. Then you have here 2 species which have 4 costal lateral scutes. You have the green sea turtle and then the flatback sea turtle. So here you have 1, 2, 3, 4 lateral scutes. And then you have 1 nuchal scute right here behind the head. And then you have 2 big prefrontal scutes. You actually see here the green color. They're 2 big prefrontal scutes. And one of the differentiating characteristics of the flatback is going to be the shape of this carapace. And they're the distribution mainly in Australia, which you will see in a second. This species here, hawksbill, also has 4 lateral scutes in yellow. So you can actually count 1, 2, 3, 4 lateral scutes, and then 1 nuchal scute right here. And then the first lateral scute, together with the greens or flagbacks and then the hawksbill, they don't touch the nuchal scute. So this is really important because when we move into the loggerheads, so for instance, let's think that you are traveling somewhere. You are doing data collection and research, and you find a sea turtle somewhere. You're swimming, you're snorkeling, you're diving, you are on a nesting beach, and you find a turtle. This is some of the information that you can actually use to say, oh, I saw a green turtle, I saw a loggerhead, oh, I saw what it looks like a loggerhead sea turtle. So the loggerhead sea turtles actually have 5 lateral scutes. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lateral scutes. And the first lateral scute actually touches the nuchal scute right there, which is the nuchal scute is the one right behind the head. If you look at the hawksbill right here, and in the green, this first lateral scute is not touching the nuchal scute. And then one interesting characteristic of the hawksbills is that they have overlapped carapace. That's what I call Ermochelis imbricata, because these scutes from the carapace overlap. The other species don't have an overlap carapace. And then you have the olive rilly and the camprillis. The olive rilly has on the left side more number of scutes. You can have 6 or more lateral scutes. And then this turtle, the camprilli, also usually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lateral scutes. But you will also distinguish that animal because of their distribution. The cam is mainly distributed in the Gulf of Mexico, and it goes up and migrates up to the east coast of the United States as well. It moves around that area. They're smaller, and then they have a limited distribution. So we're going to do a little exercise on the different species. So this is, as you can see, a massive image. This is Belinda, the one behind the turtle, not the turtle. She's a researcher, and she's about 5'8", 5'9" in height, so she's pretty tall. And you can actually see this massive leatherback sea turtle. You can see the lateral, the ridges of the carapace, kind of like the leathery looking carapace, and then the coloration black with white spots. This is the leatherback sea turtle. On the bottom, they actually camouflage themselves. So when they're hatchlings also, that happen with all the sea turtle species, they are white in the plastron. They are darker on the top. So if you are a fish, for instance, and you're looking up and you see hatchlings, because if you look up, you get all the light, so they can actually camouflage from predators. And if you're a bird and you're looking down, it would look dark. So by having a darker carapace, they would actually camouflage as well. So they have this important adaptation to avoid predators. This is a big turtle that they found in 1989 in Wales. It was almost 1 ton in weight, over 2,000 pounds. It was a dead male that ingested plastic. This is a leatherback hatchling, so a leatherback baby. Only when they are babies, you can actually see closely here. Only when leatherbacks are small turtles, they actually have scutes, scales. You can actually see here on the flippers, but as they grow, they lose those scales and becomes kind of like a leathery skin. This is another image of a leatherback sea turtle. You get all the different directions of light for the animal to actually absorb heat, because they need that heat and temperature for their metabolism. And sometimes you will find sea turtles floating on the surface and getting heat from the sun, actually to increase their temperature, irrigation. Their lungs are located close on the top of the turtle, under the carapace, and so you get that exposure of temperature and then the distribution of warm blood through the organism. They have wide distribution, big nesting in Central America, a little bit in South America, in the Caribbean, in Gabon, in the Western, in Guinea, in Gulf of Guinea, in Western Africa, and also in Papua New Guinea, some of the major nesting grounds. This is a comparison with the two biggest oval sea turtle species. You get, a loggerhead right here on the right. Sometimes greens could be as big, and then you get the leatherback right there on the left. This on the left is a loggerhead sea turtle, a big head sea turtle. This one mainly feeds on mollusks, so it's got a very big, very strong jaw, and so you'll find that organism in more neritic spaces. You can actually, if you look closely here, you can actually see the first scale from the carapace touching the nucleus scale right here. And then you have 4 more lateral scales. So this is a really important predictor of this species, loggerhead. And then the head also helps out, but mainly you follow the carapace, the scales, the lateral scales. This is another picture of a loggerhead sea turtle. You'll find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lateral scutes right here, which helps identify the species. In this case, what we have is a green sea turtle. So instead of 5 lateral scales, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 lateral scales, and the first lateral scale is not touching the nuchal scale behind the head. So this helps identify, you can see the difference here, between the first lateral scale right here, which I'm pointing, is touching the nuchal scale, and then this one, the first lateral scale, is not touching the nuchal scale right here. This is a green sea turtle hatchling. You can actually see 1, 2, 3, 4 lateral scales. And then one program of field research in Brazil, in which they're monitoring this. You can see the head is quite massive, and then the first lateral scute of this loggerhead sea turtle. And if you compare this big head compared to the green, it does look kind of like a cartoon, right? The one on the left, because this green sea turtle head is pretty small compared to the volume and the mass of the body, the green on on the right, the loggerhead on the left. Uh, Loggerhead distribution, you find a significant amount of these organisms in Florida, in Brazil, in South America, and also in Africa, in Oman as well, and in South Africa, and some other regions in Japan as well. You find loggerhead sea turtles, and some in Australia too. This is again a green. In this one, you can actually see the two prefrontal scales. So one, two prefrontal scales, and then the two postocular scales. So if you're diving, or if you're swimming or snorkeling somewhere, and you see an animal with one, two, three, four postocular scales and two prefrontal scales, you will say, okay, there is high probabilities that this organism is a green sea turtle. Okay, never identify a sea turtle based on the color of its carapace. These are all the different colors that green sea turtle carapace might look like. So many people get confused, and it's not uncommon for people to confuse green sea turtles with hawksbill sea turtles. For instance, if you look at the carapace on the right bottom side, this beautiful coloration there, or the one on the left top, it might get people confused with a hawksbill, but they don't have an overlap scutes, and I'll show you what that looks like. Worldwide distribution of green sea turtle. This is the more extensively distributed sea turtle of all species. You get tons of organisms in Central America, in Africa, in islands in the Atlantic and in the Pacific Ocean, in Indonesia, in Madagascar, Eastern and Western Africa, in Australia. It's a typical turtle, right? When people think about turtle, when they drew a sea turtle for Finding Nemo, for instance, they will think about a green turtle, right? That's kind of like the distribution allows for that. So this is again a green. But this one is a hawksbill. So look at this difference right here. So you have four postocular scales and two prefrontal scales. But when you look into the hawksbill, you can see the narrow of the beak, sorry, and you can actually count four prefrontal scales and three postocular scales. So you have one, two, three scales right here, and then one, two, three, four scales, prefrontal scales. They use this beak to actually get to crevices in narrow areas, so they mainly feed on the sponges, while green sea turtles mainly feed on seagrass, so they have a wider jaw that allows them to feed on seagrass. So they adapted over millions of years for feeding into this environment with their anatomy. So you'll find hawksbill sea turtles mainly on these rocky bottoms in coral reefs areas. And in here, you can actually distinguish the overlapping of the scutes. So if you see this scale right here, this one overlaps with this one, and this one overlaps with this one. That doesn't happen with the other species with the green, but I'll show you another picture of a green. But this one is quite evident. In here, you can actually also see the overlapping of the hawksbill sea turtle. And then one characteristic is also the saw ridge. So they have a ridge here around the carapace, which is very distinctive of this species as well. One important thing is that this is the only species, this species is critically endangered, meaning that there has been a population loss of about 80% in the last 10 years or 3 generations. So this is quite significant. And so if you go into LAX and you see this image right here, illegally traded, that means that these organisms have been killed for many years in many places for their scutes. And their scutes could be used to make things such as jewelry. So current plastic, we're talking about the early 1900s, but before the time, hawksbill scutes were used as plastic, for instance, because they will be malleable. If you get a plate and you heat it up in hot water, it will be malleable and you can actually shape it. And so what you'll see here is I do this exercise with my students. So one of the things that we do is I bring all of these materials and they identify which one looks like true hawksbill, which one doesn't look like true hawksbill, what are the characteristics that makes it plastic, makes it true hawksbill, and then we go over that in consideration of direct efforts for conserving this species, because the decimation of these populations worldwide have been linked to destruction of the scutes and the scales from their carapace and the carapace plates to do jewelry, and that that requires the organisms to be killed in order to extract that part of the body. Um, this is a green turtle right here, which I already showed you, 4 lateral scutes, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can actually see here that there is no overlapping of the carapace scutes. Okay. I already talked to you a little bit about the jaw, the shape of the jaw. You can see the green or wider shape compared to the hawksbill, which is quite pointy, and then you can see the shape of the carapace there with the overlapping and the lateral the sword ridge. Big distribution of hawksbills, you will find it mainly in coral reef areas, so in the Mesoamerican reef, in Australia, also in the Seychelles, there is an important population, in Oman, and then the Red Sea. They're actually in the second century, hawksbill plates or material was considered one of the most important products for trade ports, even before frankincense and even before ivory. So it was widely traded. Then the flatback, which is mainly distributed in Australia, you can actually see the carapace is really interesting because it sort of points out here. It looks like a sort of like a plate, kind of looking. This is a flatback right here with a satellite transmitter on it, so that you can actually determine their migration patterns. And so their distribution here in close to Papua New Guinea, mainly in northern Australia, in the eastern part, and also in the western area, close to Perth here, and then also in close to Queensland, close to the Great Barrier Reef, and Northern Territory, important indigenous territory there. And then finally, we get the Ridleys, which is the olive ridley and then the Kemp ridley. These organisms nest as solitary nesters, or they can actually come in a behavior called mass nesting events, this is a real picture of a mass nesting event when thousands of sea turtles gather at the same time to lay their eggs. And so one of the fascinating things about sea turtles, like in this case, for instance, you get a whole diversity of components, right? And so it's not only learning or studying sea turtles because they're cute and nice, it's because all the different extensions that sea turtles might actually have. You can, we've been interacting with sea turtles for thousands of years. You have communities that depend on these organisms for many, many generations. You have economic analysis and components that you can actually take out of these organisms, extractive and non-extractive uses, oceanographic studies of behavior, migratory patterns. You can work on policy because they have no boundaries, so they can actually share many different areas as they migrate to the different oceans, or they might share different nesting ground from different places. And so there's a whole variety of topics that could be explored when studying sea turtles. This is an aerial picture of a mass nesting event. You can actually see a couple of people here, and I think there is a doggy that I don't know what it's doing there. It shouldn't be there, but I think it's right here, sort of lost in amongst all. Maybe the dog wants to be a turtle, but this tons of sea turtles nesting in this important site, which I've been working at for the last 20 years. Distribution of the olive ridleys, Central America is really important, and then in India as well, and in South America. So I show you these maps because it's mainly an idea for you to have on how widely distributed sea turtles are. And this is the Kemp ridley, the last one that we have. To actually, this one mainly nests in the Gulf of Mexico in mass nesting numbers, and sometimes in solitary nest numbers in some specific areas. You can actually see a map here of their distribution with mass nesting events here in Mexico, but also nesting in the United States. So they go back and forth, they cross these frontiers, and sometimes they migrate and swim a little bit up into the east coast as well. And some of them probably get cold stone as well, that they need to be rescued from that cold environment. So I wanted to show you that. I know it was fast, but we only have 50 minutes. I usually give this class is about an hour and 15 minutes, but I wanted to take something out of it. And so let's practice a little bit. So I will show you a few pictures of turtles from the information that I actually just shared. And I want you to tell me through the chat what species you think it is. Okay, so what species you think this one is? And then I will ask questions at the very end. Uh, so what species do you guys think this is? Okay, Cami. Okay, keep going. Okay. Okay, we're tied. Hawksbill green, Hawksbill green, Hawksbill sea turtle, Oxbill, like it's called in the Caribbean, Hawksbill, and that is correct. This is a Hawksbill sea turtle. So you have 4 prefrontal scales and 3 postocular scales. Well done, guys. This is a Hawksbill. What about this one? What is this one? Look at the shape of the carapace. All right, very clear. Flag back, flag back, flag back. Well done. Yes. Well, very, very attentive people we have here. Future students, hopefully. Green, sorry. Anyway, I'm gonna pass this one because I just say it's just a green. But what about this one? What is this one? All right, this is a tricky one. This is a hatchling. What sea turtle species is this one? All right. Keep going, keep going. Anybody else? Okay, we got a couple loggerheads and a couple hawksbills, again tied. All right. Loggerhead, this is effectively a loggerhead. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lateral scutes. And so that's the reference, the only reference that we have right now. It could be confusing to a hawksbill because, it looks like it's a little bit overlap, but sometimes when they're this size, you actually see here. What is this one? Last one. What is this species right now? You can actually see the scutes and the plates. And then the postocular. Yes, well done. All right. How about this one? We can keep on going. Looking at the postocular scales. All right. And then you remember the lateral scutes. Really important. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a green. All right. Well done, everybody. And this one is evidently a leatherback. You can actually see here the white area of the plastron. And then a mass nesting event of an olive ridley. But we are on time right now. We can open for more questions in the queue. Actually, we're going to move into the queue and Q&A.